I recently started dating again after being single for over 2 years. And what has it been like dating again after a hiatus? Triggering. It's been triggering. No, but really my experience has run the gamut. So I want to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Let's break it all down. This is going to be a longer, chattier video today, almost more like podcast-esque, but I will do my best to include chapters so you can jump around as you wish. And for those who are new here, I will give a quick TLDR, just a little bit of context. My name is Kate. I'm 37. I live in Toronto. I was born and raised in the Greater Toronto area, and I moved back here a couple years ago after a pretty tumultuous breakup. And so I became single again very early in 2023, right as I was sort of like trying to reestablish my life here in Toronto. And I've made a few other videos talking about this, so feel free to go back and watch those if you're interested. But essentially after taking some time following my breakup in early 2023, like taking a few months just to kind of like heal, recover, I did start going on a handful of dates, but I really wasn't meaningfully dating in 2023. Like I remember re-downloading the apps, and even as I was re-downloading them, like just feeling so, like my heart wasn't in it at all. And so I think in 2023, I went on maybe 3 or 4 dates, like over the course of that summer. And then by the fall, I was really just starting to realize that I didn't want to date. I was not interested in being in a relationship. Importantly, I think that was the bigger realization, was that I was sort of like realizing, what are you even dating for? You don't want to have a partner right now. Like you don't want a relationship. So what are you doing on the apps? And so by October, November of 2023, I just completely deleted all of the apps. I got rid of Bumble, Hinge. I think I may have had a couple others at some point. So I just, cold turkey deleted them all, and I stayed off of them until 2025. I only ended up reinstalling them in March of this year. If you want to hear about my experiences of being off the apps, I made a whole video about that. So definitely feel free to go back and check that out if you are interested in hearing about that year plus of time where I very intentionally took a pause from dating, because not only was I off the dating apps, I also wasn't really interested in meeting people in real life. Like I wasn't, putting myself out there. It was a very, very intentional pause from all dating. As I was going through this very intentional break, which 2 years is not the longest amount of time, but it's also not the shortest either. And I feel like if you are someone who has been single in their 30s, you will understand this, that at any point you are single, people act as if it's a condition that you must be trying to remedy. So it's very strange to be single and to just be single. Like not dating, not interested, not talking to anyone, not trying to be set up, like you're just existing. And people, at least in my experience, I don't know if this is universal, but people in my experience really struggle with this, because there would always be inevitable questions of like, oh, are you seeing someone? Or like, oh, are you on the apps? Or, and it was always just like, no. And I'm not interested in it at all. So while I was taking this hiatus for a couple years, I actually didn't know myself if or when it would end. I really, really, really came to enjoy being single. I always have, and I've always taken breaks between long-term relationships, but I have never really leaned into being single in the way that I did in these last couple years, where I was so content. And in a way, I almost didn't want to interrupt it. And in some ways, I still don't. Even though I have been dating this year, I've, been so much of the mind that it would take such an extraordinary person for me to want to make room for them in my life. And I think that is part of what has made dating so much more approachable and palatable and frankly enjoyable this time around, because I have come at it with an extremely different mindset. Previously, in my late 20s and early 30s, I was very much in the pursuit of, a very serious, committed, long-term relationship, ideally leading to marriage. I wanted children, I wanted a family. I really wanted all of those things. And I think interestingly enough, because I was so hyper-focused on those objectives, it led me to selecting the wrong people. It led me to dating the wrong people. I think it led me to really falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy and thinking, oh, I've already spent X amount of time with this person, or oh, I've already invested X amount. We should really just try and keep going and keep fighting for this and keep trying to figure this out, even when it clearly isn't working. Because I was so focused on those outcomes, I don't think I was necessarily, maybe picking up on certain red flags or even beige flags. It might not have even been things that were overtly wrong, perhaps just things that, clearly signaled we don't fit. Like, we are not compatible, and this is not what I'm looking for in a life partner. I think I would have been more attuned to those things, or I would have been able to see those things more honestly if I weren't so set on marriage and children as an objective, which seems like a really cruel reality. I would be curious to know if anyone else has experienced this or felt similarly dating in their 20s and 30s. But all to say, I ended up having a complete 180 on this in my mid-30s. I ended up having a pretty groundbreaking shift in how I feel about marriage, family, children, partnership in general, relationships, romantic relationships, platonic relationships. Like, I really just did, a 180 around the time that my relationship with my fiance ended. And I think I was around 35 at the time, and I was really just, like, having this come to Jesus moment. And so now my view has changed so much, and I don't really think of marriage as a prize. It's not something I really like personally aspire to, as much as I certainly can appreciate and understand the reasons why people still get married. And I still find it genuinely so exciting and happy when, like, my loved ones get married. I see why they are making that choice. And for them, I can see how much it makes sense, how much it fits. And I love that for them. That being said, I still think that marriage is far too much the center of focus and attention in our society. And marriage is not a prize, especially for women in hetero relationships. And so I think when I started to understand that more clearly, I really started to question my own relationship with marriage, my own desires, and really just question whether this is something I even wanted to do in the first place. And so while I haven't ruled marriage out completely, I still might get married one day. That's entirely possible, and I'm not even opposed to the idea. But just to say that marriage is not an overt objective in my life anymore. It is not something I'm working towards. It's not something I am aspiring towards. I feel like it has a much more just sort of neutral place in my life, where I think of it as, that might be something that could happen one day with, a particular person, with the right person. But marriage in and of itself is not an institution I am dying to participate in, if that makes sense. But even alongside that, my views on the desire to have, a very committed, very long-term, ideally lifelong relationship have also evolved. And I saw a quote, I think on Instagram recently, that I think really, best sums up how I feel about it. The gist of the quote was essentially, relationships are not about how you can meet each other's needs. They are about how you can experience life together. And I think this so perfectly captures how I feel about relationships now. Because again, rewinding 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I think I very much was operating in a framework of, trying to find this person, trying to find this partner who would be all of these things to me, that would fulfill all of these roles in my life, who would be this person that would, largely address my needs, meet my needs, and that was part of their responsibility as my partner. And now I view this so differently. So even dating again, which has been kind of a disaster, being totally honest, like, I've had some really negative experiences in the last few months, just like people ghosting, people being not very communicative about what they want or what they're looking for, just like all of the things that you would imagine. But I have recently started seeing someone, like one person, that I'm spending time with, and it's still not, very serious. It's still on the newer side. But I will say what has been interesting with this person is feeling so much more that it is about how we can experience life together versus how can this person meet my needs. And I think it's really made for a much healthier start to our relationship. I think it's taken a lot of pressure off, and we both have a lot of, like circumstantial life things happening, which I won't really get into. I'm really protective of other people in my life on this channel. I don't really ever talk about personal things that other people are dealing with. It's really just about myself and my own perspectives on things. And so I'm not going to go into the details of what life circumstance things are, a little bit complicating. But I think just having this perspective of how can we enjoy each other? How do we experience life together has been very freeing. I think the best way I can explain it is that even though this person is extremely attentive and extremely communicative and extremely emotionally intelligent, I still look inward to myself as the person to solve my problems, as the person to make sure that I'm happy, as the person who needs to self-soothe and self-regulate and handle my own emotions. And that doesn't mean that this person doesn't have any role in that. Of course we communicate, of course we support each other, we communicate about things that are important to us, but ultimately the onus is on me to take care of myself. And honestly, it's been really challenging because I haven't been in a romantic relationship in 2.5 years. And in that time, I wasn't really dating either. So even though I've done a bunch of therapy in the last couple of years, I've worked on myself a lot, you are not really consistently flexing that muscle until you are back in a situation where you are having romantic interactions again, where you are being confronted with your own triggers and insecurities, where you might have conflict or differences that you need to reconcile. And so that's largely why it's been triggering. I mean, it's been triggering just dating again, getting rejected is triggering, navigating those, waters with someone in the early stages of a relationship as you're learning each other can be triggering. Like it brings up a lot. And so it's been challenging, but I also feel the best equipped I ever have in my life to be dating as someone who is really capable of self-regulating. So as much as I enjoy this person, and they probably are one of the most emotionally intelligent and communicative people I've ever dated, I also just feel so much better equipped myself to do these things. And I think all of these things have been super integral in the early stages of dating someone, but also just in dating in general, like in the talking stages, in the early dating stages with other people, like just being on the apps. Dating apps are hell. They are worse than ever. I am so sorry if you've been off them or you are newly single and you have been considering getting back on them, but they are hell. They are worse in 2025 than I think I've ever experienced before, and I have been using them on and off for the last decade. Truly, dating apps in 2025, they're just absolutely the worst thing ever. But then on the other hand, I met the person I'm seeing on Tinder. So it really is one of those things where you never know. But that being said, I also met this person as I was coming to the tail end of my patience with the apps. I remember actually because I hadn't been using Tinder. I had been using a couple other apps primarily. And I downloaded Tinder as this last ditch effort. And I was like, you know what? One of my good friends met her partner. They've been together for a couple years now. They met on Tinder, and she had mentioned it at one point and just said, hey, give it a go. What do you have to lose? So that played back in my mind. And I thought, yeah, I haven't been on Tinder in years. Let's see what's happening. Downloaded it, had some terrible experiences, but I also did very quickly meet this person. It was within the first 24 hours, and then we were on a date 48 hours later, and then I don't think I ever opened Tinder again. So not to say they can't work, they absolutely can. It's more just about what are you willing to put yourself through to use these platforms in order to potentially find someone. And I was kind of getting to the end of my rope. I was running out of patience, and I really truly was saying to people at that time, I'm going to use Tinder for a week and then I'm deleting it. I'm done. I can't take this anymore. Even though I had only been back on the apps for a couple months, it just wasn't worthwhile enough to me. And a big part of that is because I just don't value marriage and romantic relationships in the same way that I used to. And so for me, it's a lot to put myself through for something that, I may want, and I may want companionship or a relationship, but is it worth it when I am also very happy single? Is it worth it to put myself through these interactions looking for something when I know that the alternative is also great? And so I think I probably would have bailed on the apps pretty soon after if I hadn't met this person. And some people might use this story as a case study of why you should keep using the apps and why you should keep staying on them, because you never know, your person might be right around the corner. No, don't do that. If you are feeling so over it, if you are burnt out, if you are exhausted, get rid of them. Because being single is a fantastic alternative. And I feel like that just never gets positioned as an equally viable and desirable option in life. We are so focused on partnering up that you almost have to consciously remind yourself, no, being single is great. There are so many benefits to it. And so I think I would have approached that point relatively quickly, but I did end up meeting this person, and who knows what will happen. But I will say, I know regardless of what happens, I will be good. And I really think this did just make dating so much easier. It allowed me to have such better boundaries. it allowed me that when I was talking to people on the apps or going on dates to like much more quickly and immediately rule people out. So if we went on one date and there was something about it that was off, there was a little red flag, something like that, I just immediately let the person know, hey, like, don't really see this going anywhere, or like, I don't think this is gonna pan out. And so even though the apps are kind of terrible and going on bad dates is terrible and a lot about dating is terrible, I think if you have strong boundaries and strong standards, that it really does actually make it a lot easier to navigate. And so I think that's all I'd say, is that if you are someone who is entertaining getting back on the apps, to think very clearly, long and hard about what it is you want, what kind of person you are looking for, and making sure to maintain those boundaries. I feel like there is so much messaging of give this person another chance and give them another chance and give them a try and stay open. And while I see where a lot of that is coming from, doing that has only ever led me to terrible places. It has only ever led me to dating people that I had no business dating for as long as I did. It has only led me down bad paths. And I'm not saying like rule somebody out the second they do some tiny thing that you don't like. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I will say is that if there are things that you know are important to you, that within the first few interactions, the first few texts, the first couple dates, you're seeing things that are inconsistent with that, listen to your gut. Don't waste the time. This isn't someone you want to sink 3 months or 6 months into. I feel like the name of the game with dating is just like be very quick to identify when someone is just not for you. You know, it doesn't always have to be like this super personal or like negative thing about them. And I think continuing to build a really strong relationship with yourself is one of the best things that you can do, because I think that also does just foster better boundaries. I think it does, like, having this willingness to be alone actually does make it so that you can stand on business when things are not going right in dating, and that you honor yourself and your needs in the process. And I think it does also help provide a healthy level of detachment from dating, because as much as no one really wants to say this, finding a life partner is largely about luck. You know, a lot of it is just like right place, right time. A lot of people were just very early to find this person in high school or earlier on in life. A lot of people just happen to download Tinder for a week or a day, and then they meet this person. It is largely driven by luck. And I think having a great relationship with yourself and being very content to be on your own and to be single just does make it so that you have a little bit more of detachment from the dating process. You're not getting so emotionally invested in every single like little thing that happens. And I think that's a good thing. And I think even having a healthy level of detachment with the people that you actually are seeing is a good thing too. And I don't mean it to sound that you should be like cold or distant with the person you're dating. Quite the opposite. In fact, with the person I'm seeing right now, I actually feel like this is my most lover girl era. So it's not about being distant or trying to keep this person at arm's length. It's just about knowing, hey, we each have our own lives, and it would be great if something worked out with this person, but my life will also be great if it doesn't. And that's all I mean by a healthy level of detachment, is that there's so many things in life that we can't control. Circumstantial things for sure, but also just even, is this person I'm with going to continue to reciprocate my feelings? Are they going to continue to see me in the same way? Are they going to continue to have feelings for me? And that's something you can't control ever, you know? Even when you're with someone for a long time, even if you're married to that person, that is not something you can control. And so I think just having a healthy level of detachment and really focusing on yourself, nourishing yourself, having an amazing relationship with yourself, having your own rich, you know, inner life, and then also just personal life, social life, work life, whatever it is you love, then that helps create just this little bit of detachment where you can say, if this ends, I would be sad. I'd be really sad, but I will be okay. Okay, I've been talking, so I'm gonna leave it there for today. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts, if anything I said really resonated with you. And also let me know in the comments if you even enjoy this kind of content. Like, I've made a few videos along these lines, but it is kind of outside of my usual wheelhouse. So I won't keep making these videos unless people actually, you know, enjoy them or connect with them in some way. So let me know down below as well. That would be really helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.